Welcome back. Let's turn to our other top focus today. A new report in Vanity Fair magazine throws even more light on possible US government interference that prevented studies on the origin of the virus in China that has sparked the world's worst pandemic. There are now multiple reports that clearly hint that the virus could have leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This throws new questions, also opens up a debate over an alleged cover-up bid. In a moment, we'll be joined by an author of that magazine article, but first, a look at this report.
A new investigation published in a venerable American magazine has made a stunning claim. It says that the United States government tried to cover up reports of the virus emerging from a lab in Wuhan's Institute of Virology. The report in Vanity Fair says the United States State Department hampered a probe into COVID-19's origin at every step because it feared the findings would draw attention to the fact that the US government was funding the lab. The revelations come at a time when there's a global cry for clarity on the origins of the virus, with fingers being pointed at China for hiding facts.
We would, though, like for everyone out there to separate, if they can, the politics of this issue from the science. This whole process is being poisoned by politics.
The damning expose of the US State Department follows the claims that the Dr. Fauci-headed NIH had funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Fauci has denied, though, that the US funded the controversial study in Wuhan. Bureau Report, India Today.
And joining me now is the author of that Vanity Fair magazine article that hints at a cover-up in the very top in the United States. Author of Bottle of Lies, contributing editor at Vanity Fair, Katherine Eban joins me. Appreciate your joining us, Katherine. You've come up with some stunning revelations on the Wuhan COVID lab leak theory that the world at the moment seems to be obsessed with. In fact, your article, you suggest that the former secretary to the Bureau of Arms Control in an internal document had written that his bureau was warned in the US not to pursue an investigation into the COVID virus because it would open a can of worms. Do you want to tell us today, Katherine, what was the can of worms that they feared would be opened if they carried on their investigation into the Wuhan virus?
Thanks for having me. So the can of worms is risky research known as gain-of-function research that the US government has been funding through grant money, and which some of that money went to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The gain-of-function research in question is manipulating pathogens to see if they can become more infectious to humans. Some of the grant money was given to an intermediary who in turn routed that money to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. What my sources indicated to me is that there is a big gain-of-function bureaucracy within the federal government. So there's been support for this kind of research. That research was going on at a laboratory 7 miles away from the Wuhan seafood market. And there are questions about whether it is possible that COVID-19 began as some kind of accidental or unintentional lab leak from that facility.
So you seem to be clearly hinting that there was a cover-up at some level, but you also say in the article that the idea of the lab leak first came to the NSC officials in the United States, not from the Trump administration, but from Chinese social media users and some Chinese virologists who began sharing their suspicion as early as January 2020. So in a sense, this seems to be building up for a while, and it's only now that the idea that this was a Wuhan lab leak is catching traction.
Well, that's right. I mean, early on, there were even 2 Chinese researchers in Wuhan who put up a preprint article saying, we've surveilled this area, and there are these 2 big labs that are doing this coronavirus research right in the area of the outbreak. And they've collected this extensive armament of viral bat samples. And so we believe that this has come from a laboratory. Now, that paper was immediately taken down offline, but not before it sort of put US government officials on notice. They in turn began probing the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the kind of research they were doing, and it raised a lot of questions.
So this was happening in Jan of 2020. Do you believe in a sense that had this investigation been carried to its logical conclusion over the last 12 months, perhaps all that we are learning about this lab leak at the moment could have come out in earlier? Let me be more direct. Are you now, first of all, more and more convinced of the lab leak theory?
I'm not convinced of anything, and our article comes to no conclusion. What our article does clearly indicate is that a comprehensive investigation was blocked due to conflicts of interest.
But you also raise another interesting argument in the article that you've written about mutation. You cite Alina Chan in the article to say that the early sequence of the virus showed little evidence of mutation, and had the virus come from an animal source, there would have been multiple mutations. But isn't it a matter of fact that the world is seeing thousands of mutations? Does it in that sense also weaken the lab origin theory?
There's a lot of scientific evidence on one side of this argument and the other. And there is a lot of scientific disagreement. One of the issues we raise is the fact that there really was no scientific consensus from early on, even though one was essentially manufactured.
You also mentioned, Katherine Eban, a 2012 incident of the Moijang miners who were assigned to shovel out bat faces from a mine floor, and the disease they developed is strikingly similar to COVID virus. Does it mean possibly that the virus was out there and the Chinese knew about it as early as 2012, kept it a secret, this gets leaked later to the world? Is that a growing possibility now?
I think it raises a lot of questions about why China was not more candid and forthcoming about what was uncovered in that mine. There were a lot of samples and viral sequences that were taken from that mine to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The problem is the database in which those sequences were all logged has been taken offline. It was taken offline 3 months before the start of the pandemic. So we really don't know what kind of viral sequences the Wuhan Institute of Virology was working with.
But at the same time, it's not just your article, Katherine Eban. More and more US scientists, people in the field, are suggesting the possibility of a strong indication that it was the lab where the infection started. And now that more and more people are talking about it, where do you think this leaves the entire lab leak theory? Will it actually get pushed forward or not?
Well, what the most credible people here are calling for is a thorough investigation. And what they're pointing to is the fact that this investigation never occurred. The World Health Organization, in a mission that they helped to organize, a group of independent experts went to China and really only gave a sort of cursory exploration of the lab leak hypothesis. And on the basis of that, they deemed it to be improbable. But what experts are pointing out now is that there has been no real proper inquiry that allows us to take the lab leak hypothesis off the table. Now, President Biden has said as much himself recently. He has directed his intelligence agencies to go back to the drawing board and to give him a report in 90 days as to what they may find. So this raises the question of, what does the U.S. have in its files? Do we have any evidence that can help us move this question forward? Because China has already said it's done. It's not going to allow any further inquiry. We're not going to be able to see lab notebooks. We're not going to be able to see raw data. So, governments on their own are going to have to look at what they've got in their intelligence files.
But that's precisely the problem, isn't it, Katherine Eban, that scientists, including the likes of Dr. Fauci at the top of America's medical administration, that the World Health Organization made the mistake of providing a clean chit to the Chinese too soon. Is it too late, therefore?
It may end up having been a mistake. You know, if in fact it ends up being a mistake, there's a difference between a mistake and a conspiracy. So one of the things that I tried to do in my reporting is peel away the wild conspiracy theories that are circulating out there. You know, this has been so politicized. So, you know, I'm not sure if we are looking at a grand conspiracy so much as a kind of failures that were driven in part by conflicts of interest.
Which could have resulted in a grand cover-up. So my final question now, Katherine Eban, now that you've got a new administration in the White House promising a thorough investigation, all these articles coming out, do you see the truth ever coming out of what happened in Wuhan?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Of course, I think it's immensely important for the world to know where this originated because it has huge implications, right? If it came from a lab, we have to completely overhaul how this kind of laboratory work is regulated. If it came from nature, we have to really rethink, you know, our incursions into these wild places. So it has huge consequences for the future. I'd like to think that we will one day get to an answer, but I'm not sure.
Katherine Eban, you've joined us there from New York. Thank you very much. And to your investigation into the Wuhan lab leak, lots of data coming out of that article. Thanks very much for joining me.